Hello. Welcome to 3 Minutes to Change, episode 3. 3 decades of tribulation with disease. For over 35 years, I was chronically ill with multiple diseases, many of which are among those usually classified as incurables, meaning daily pain and discomfort from symptoms that continue to break out, as well as misery from the side effects of the several doses of the many medications that must be taken in the course of a very shortened life span. Others classified as curable, which meant that at some point it was expected that there would be permanent cessation of medications without breakout of symptoms. Some of the diseases were life-threatening, others debilitating, while some were mostly a nuisance. And so for 35 years, I suffered from severe childhood onset asthma, a life-threatening and debilitating condition. 16 years of stomach pains, variously diagnosed as irritable bowel syndrome and food allergies, both debilitating conditions. For 8 years, I was grossly obese, an underrated but serious condition that is life-threatening, debilitating, and a nuisance. For 6 years, I had hemorrhoids or piles, a condition which is both life-threatening and a nuisance. For 5 years, I suffered from diabetes and hypertension, both seriously life-threatening and debilitating, and a nuisance too, on account of their being among the incurables. Diabetes and hypertension are among the leading causes of strokes, organ failures, aside from causing perpetual lack of energy and enthusiasm for life. For 3 years, I had erectile dysfunction, referred to in local parlance as power failure. Though the butt of many jokes, and so usually taken lightly, unbeknownst to many, power failure is a life-threatening condition. It is often a marker for impending heart attack, which it precedes by about 3 years. In addition to these principal conditions, I also suffered for 2 years conditions associated with chronic anxiety, globus hystericus, where I constantly had sensation of a lump in my throat, and tinnitus, where there is constant ringing in the ears. Both conditions were nuisance diseases, not life-threatening. For 14 years, I had stomach ulcers with occult blood loss, a life-threatening condition associated with cerebrovascular accidents or strokes too. Because of the myriad of health woes, but most especially the excruciating chronic abdominal pains, which I endured for 10 years, I virtually withdrew from society, which in turn led to other set of woes, terrible feelings of loneliness and unhappiness, which in turn resulted in severe depression. Anyone who has not suffered this underrated condition, I mean severe depression, would have no idea how crippling it can really be. It has led to suicides on occasions. The recalcitrance to treatment of most of the health problems led to my becoming a frequent visitor of several hospitals and laboratories as a patient. In the course of the laboratory visits, I went through more tests than time would permit me to recount. However, I will recount some of the rather more invasive ones. Endoscopy, the passing of a metal steel tube through the mouth into the stomach, where multiple ulcers were discovered. Despite the discomfort of the procedure, I had to undergo the test on 3 separate occasions because the symptoms were unresponsive to the medications prescribed following the diagnosis of stomach ulcer. I underwent barium meal and barium enema imaging procedures where I had to swallow the contrast media barium and x-rays were taken. Then, turned upside down on a rotating couch, the contrast media was infused through my anus, after which another round of x-rays, this time of the colon, were taken. These tests were to check for tumors, but thankfully there were none. I underwent 2D echocardiography, a real-time imaging of the heart, and electrocardiography or ECG to check for congenital cardiac anomalies or secondary heart diseases. Again, thankfully, the heart had not sustained any damage. I underwent lung function tests to check for respiratory insufficiency because of the many years of asthma. Again, thankfully, there was no insufficiency. Repeated blood tests for inflammatory markers, sugar and cholesterol levels, and other parameters, which unfortunately revealed very high fasting blood sugar indicative of type 2 diabetes and hypercholesterolemia. Stool analysis, which revealed the presence of what is termed occult blood in the stool, a marker of intestinal bleeding, which in my case was from the stomach ulcers. Though many of the illnesses such as the diabetes type 2 and the high blood pressure are debilitating and life-threatening all at once, there was drugs to alleviate their symptoms. But the unrelenting stomach pain at a stage diagnosed as irritable bowel syndrome was absolutely unresponsive to medications. On account of the conditions, at some stage I was prescribed and had to take well over 10 tablets daily, omeprazole for the stomach ulcers and antibiotics for the Helicobacter pylori bacteria causally implicated in stomach ulcers. The blood pressure lowering medicine called Tritis. For asthma, in the early days, I was on Franol tablets and aminophylline intravenous injections. Later, it was changed to prednisolone tablets and Ventolin tablets, as well as Ventolin and Becotide inhalers. For the diabetes, I was on metformin tablets and Anusol suppositories and cream for the hemorrhoids or piles. For the irritable bowel syndrome, I was placed on probiotics, which are encapsulated bacteria expected to restore normal gut flora, thought to have been altered by the many pills, especially the antibiotics. For the globus hystericus and tinnitus, I was prescribed the anxiolytic Lexotan. I was also frequently prescribed other antibiotics like erythromycin to deal with the recurrent tonsillitis, the result of the immune suppressing side effect of the asthma medications, or some of them. Despite these medications, most of the conditions persisted. Some symptoms like wheezing in the airways, itching around the anus would appear to improve, but the moment the medications were withdrawn, pronto, the symptoms staged a comeback and the treatment would have to be reinstituted. Others, like the chronic abdominal pains, never responded to the medications. Of course, the obesity was unrelenting as the ravenous appetite never abated. Mystified and frustrated, one of my senior colleagues recommended the elective surgery, exploratory laparotomy, where the abdomen was to be cut open for visual inspection. This was slated for mid-December 2004. While there in the consulting room, resigned to my fate, I consented to the idea. However, on getting home, I began to think to myself, there must be another way. I had been sick for all of my 35 years with no resolution, and since all surgeries carried the potential risk of death on the operating table or post-operatively, I thought to myself, why not turn to God for help? What did I have to lose? And my answer was nothing. Before that day, in December 2004, I had gradually, over the period of a decade and a half, become an ardent cynic, skeptic, and doubter of anything spirituality. A doubter of the idea of God intervening in the world to benefit an individual human being. I was skeptical of the effectiveness of prayer and the idea of miracles for the individual. I considered all things religious and spiritual in general to be superstition, the irrational beliefs of the ignorant encouraged by charlatans. I had come to the view that the words and histories written in the Bible were more of fairy tales than fact. And so I teetered on the madness called atheism. In fact, in those days, the mention of the words spirituality or miracle were enough to set me off. And I was convinced that I had good reason for my cynical attitude to prayer, because the prayers of virtually everyone I knew were never answered. I will stop here and continue the narrative in episode 4. God bless you. I am Dr. C.